to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and turn on my webcam. All right, and there I am. So good morning to some and good afternoon to others, and welcome to this month's presentation, the first of the year for US CAD's Infrastructure Tuesdays. I'd like to welcome you to this presentation on grading optimization in Civil 3D. So before we get started, this is our team. I'm one of several techs that we have on our team. You can see together we have over 100 years of experience in the industry, and we are adding to our team. So this slide will change, but this is our team. And hey, all a great bunch of people except that guy in the upper left-hand corner. I don't know who he is, but anyways, so my name is Ron Couillard, and I'm with US CAD. I currently work as a solutions consultant and team lead. My background is civil design. So I have been in the industry as a drafter, a designer, as a CAD manager, and now I've been with US CAD. I just went over 5 years a few months back. So I do things like training and presentations like this one and project mentoring, software installs, that type of stuff, but it's all related to the civil infrastructure side of the house. Okay, with that being said, hey, where will this be posted? Is this going to be a recording that gets posted somewhere? And what happens if I missed a US CAD hosted webinar? Well, you'll be able to catch this presentation again online if you need to for a limited time. You can just go to the uscad.com website, go up under resources and click on Video Vault, and you'll be able to see this recording. Okay, now one thing I did want to mention real quick, because I gave a brief introduction of myself, and I should have mentioned this. For those of you that were expecting or even hoping to see my coworker, Doug Benoit, well, he was feeling a bit under the weather over the holidays, so I decided to take this one for him so that he could concentrate on feeling a little better. So that's why I'm doing this presentation. Okay, now with that being said, go to our uscad.com website and go to events to register for upcoming Infrastructure Tuesdays, which happen the first Tuesday of every month. You can see on February 1st, we have an Infrastructure Tuesday called Taming Civil 3D Data with Project Explorer. Go up to our website to go ahead and register for that. The subsequent months following have not been announced yet, but they will be up on our website. I know we have the topics and instructors are nailed down for that. They're just not up on our website yet, but they will be soon. Okay. Now, take advantage of Infrastructure Universe. If you haven't signed up to get workflows and updates and some of the latest tools out there, go to the uscad.com website, go to resources, and then go to Infrastructure Universe so that you can sign up to be a part of Infrastructure Universe. Now, real quick, this slide shows our locations. You can see we are coast to coast. We're all over the place. There's a slide showing the listing of our offices. So you know what? Enough with that. Let's talk about why we're here, why you guys are here, and what we want to show you and what we're going to accomplish with today's presentation. So obviously, we're here to talk about grading optimization in Civil 3D. Specifically, we're going to give you an overview of the buttons and the functions contained in grading optimization, which is built into Civil 3D. We're going to talk about grading optimization elements. What are these things? How do we use them? How do they get applied in grading optimization? What's the strategy? What do we want to gain out of this? How do we go about gaining the maximum use of grading optimization? So we'll discuss the strategy throughout this presentation. We'll create grading objects. Not only will we create them, we'll talk about what each type can do for us and the settings behind them. We'll go through optimizing grading. So basically, we will hit the optimize button, we'll review the results, and in some cases, we might want to edit those results, right? Maybe we're not happy with some of the things that happened. So we'll talk about editing some of the properties and some of the criterias. And finally, we'll send the optimization back to Civil 3D, which essentially is creating a surface in Civil 3D. Okay, one footnote I have for you, the class drawing that I'm going to be presenting with, I actually took this from an AU class, CES 500056. And for those that may have seen that class, that drawing may look familiar to you. I'm just using the drawing because I liked what they did with the drawing, but this is my presentation. I'm not taking any other material from that class. I just used his data set. So with that being said, I'm going to go into the software demo, but I'm going to turn off my webcam because, like I said, I don't want to use unnecessary bandwidth having the webcam turned on. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and now I'm going to switch over to Civil 3D. The only time you're going to see PowerPoint the rest of this presentation is at the end when I cover what the agenda was and I give you my contact info at the end as well, just in case you have any questions outside of this presentation. That being said, there is, in fact, I see some people have, let's see, no audio. Okay, if you're having issues with audio, you may want to go ahead and log out and then log back in, or click on your audio icon in the dashboard of Windows, and then make sure that you select an output type that you'll be able to hear the audio, because I am showing that my audio is coming through. Okay. All right. So yeah, with that being said, let's see, Craig, yeah, I believe you were the presenter that I saw on the AU class. So I decided to go ahead and make a couple of changes to make it easy for me, but I loved your approach. That's why I wanted to give credit for that. I love the approach, and I'm going to talk about what you did in here, because I thought it was a great way of essentially killing two birds with one stone, to use a very bad expression. But yes, so Craig, all props to you. I thought you did an amazing job with this drawing. So yeah, let's see, will this presentation be available later for download? Yes, that was what I showed in the PowerPoint. And because you registered, Aaron, for this, you will get a link. And basically, in a nutshell, you can go to the US CAD webpage, go to resources, and then Video Vault, and you'll be able to see it up there once it is posted. Okay. All right. So with that being the case, let's go ahead and talk about grading optimization real quick. To access grading optimization, you're going to go ahead and go to your Analyze tab of the ribbon. Okay, all the way on the far right side, we have a grading optimization panel. You can see there's basically 4 buttons here. To start off, what we're going to do is click on Grading Objects. What this does is it opens up the tool palette, so your regular Civil 3D tool palette, okay? And it opens up to the Grading Objects Imperial tab, okay? So this is on the Civil 3D tool palette. It also opens up something called the Grading Objects browser, okay? So what is the difference between the two of these? Well, you know what the tool palette is, okay? These are where your grading objects are accessed or created from, okay? So these are the actual grading object types. And over here in the grading object browser, this populates as grading objects are created, okay? Okay, how do we get the grading optimization panel if we don't have it? Okay, so that's a great question, Dante. Basically, grading optimization is a separate download and install from Civil 3D, number one. Number two, in order to get the download and install, you have to have the AEC collection. It does not come with plain hero product Civil 3D. So it is an entitlement with the AEC collection. Okay. All right. So another question, Imperial or metric tool palettes, would the program open if the metric drawing was started in metric template? I haven't tried anything with the metric template and grading optimization. I believe it would, but I haven't verified that, Greg. So, but to reiterate what I told Dante, this is a separate install from Civil 3D. So if you're not seeing the grading optimization panel, you have to download it if you are a subscriber to the AEC collection. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I talked about the grading objects button over here. You can turn on and off the browser or the palette independently. So in other words, if I click on this button here, notice I turned off the tool palette, but the grading browser resides, okay? And I can click it back on and I can do it vice versa. I can keep it where I have the palette on and the browser off, okay? And then a fourth button that we have, we will use this when we're actually ready to send the grading elements to be optimized inside of grading optimization, okay? But I'm not gonna click on this right now because what this does, it opens up another window, just like you're opening up another piece of software, but you're accessing everything from inside of Civil 3D, okay? Now let's see, Jim was asking, only works with 2022? No, actually 2021, I think it was 2021.1. I may be wrong about that, but 2021 and 2022. So if you're trying to use like 2018 or 2019, Jim, that's not gonna work. You have to have 2021 or 2022, and you have to have the latest service packs installed. Craig saying no, just 2022. I've been told that it works with 2021 as well. So maybe I'll take a look. Let's see. I have and use 2021, but it's not in my download area. I'll double check on that and let you guys know. But Craig is saying that it's just 2022. Be that as it may, it's probably a good idea to be using 2022 anyways with the latest service packs. And I tell you why, they have updated grading optimization over the past several months. They've added new elements to it, things like a retaining wall, okay? So probably a good idea to be up and running on the latest and greatest anyways, okay? So with that being said, one thing that I wanted to point out is in this drawing, the reason why I grabbed this, not only Craig, did you have a good example of just about every type of grading object, but I liked the approach of having polylines as well as hatching. And that's what we have in this drawing. It was categorized very nicely with the use of polylines and hatching. And there's really a couple of things that can be accomplished with this. Number one, we can select the polylines or the hatching to be able to produce or create grading objects. But the other element of that is that it creates a really cool exhibit. Okay, so if you have to have an exhibit type drawing, it can also be used for the grading optimization, which is why I thought this was brilliant, okay, to have hatching and the polylines, okay? But let's take a step back for a second and talk about what we actually need for grading optimization to work, okay? Some people that I've talked to had said, well, it sounds like there's too much setup there, it's very complicated, and you know, what if I don't have any type of proposed surface started yet? Well, that's the beauty of grading optimization. Basically, if you look at what I have in the prospector, or I should say what Craig has in the prospector, right? You only need an existing surface to start with, okay? And then grading optimization uh, will do a lot of the calculations for you. So it's not like I have to go in and I have to drape some feature lines in and then I have to adjust them and I have to make all these educated guesses and things of that nature. No, grading optimization is going to do a lot of these calculations for you. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, Brian, I see your question. I'll go ahead and uh, wait till the end like you suggested, okay? So the nice thing, like I was saying, is we have an existing surface in here. Grading optimization is going to calculate the majority of elevations needed, and you don't have to enter any elevations unless there's specific items, which I'm going to talk about, like low points and bounded point grading objects, things of that nature. But other than that, you don't have to worry about entering elevations on these items, which is really cool. Okay, so what was cool with this drawing was I loved what Craig did, and you're going to see to get started, we would go ahead and we would select the grading object types that we want, and we'd go ahead and apply them to elements in our drawing. So because of the time that we have together today, I may not get through each and every one of the grading objects because I want to get to the end where we actually optimize this. But I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so going through some of these grading objects, how to apply them in the drawing so that we can get to optimize at some point towards the end, okay? So to get started, I love what Craig did here. Number one, it speaks to good object naming and creation, and it also speaks to good layering, as you'll see here in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, notice we've got a little legend over here on the right side. We want to select our grading limits first, and that's an important thing to remember when it comes to grading optimization. The order that we select the items is important because of how they take precedence. And one good example of that is like a building pad grading object, right? This is going to be chosen after the grading limits get chosen so that they take precedence over the grading limits, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind about grading objects, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do, I got grading limits selected here. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna select similar, okay? And then I'm gonna go to isolate the selected object. So this makes it easy to select either the polyline or the hatch in this particular case, okay? And what I want to do is I want to select grading limit here in my tool palette. And then notice as soon as I select one of my objects from the grading palette, it says select objects to set as a zone. So I'm just going to window the polyline and the hatch. And just like that, the grading limit properties dialog box appears. Okay, now this is pretty cool because remember I talked about I loved how the layering was set up. Check it out. The name actually comes in with what you have set as the layer name. So if your company, your organization is using a solid layering convention, this is going to help you out a ton. And what you'll see when we get done with this is after it is applied, it's going to number. Okay, so it's going to take the name from the layer and it's going to number it. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now, with grading limit properties, we can use global constraints or we can customize the slope constraints, meaning I can come in here and I can set this up the way I want. So what I'm going to do for this one, I'm going to put in not 0. We'll do 40 and we'll do 1, which is outside of the global constraints, which were the 33 and the 2. But this is to show you that we can actually set these exactly to what we want them to be. So you'll notice there's some other settings that we can do as well. Depth of material, break line, grading limits. Now this is pretty cool because what this does with break line turned on, where we actually will get feature lines created with this. So that's another element of the strategy with GO or grading optimization that I'll talk about in a little while is the elements that it can actually create for us. Okay, underneath that you see the color. Okay, the color is coming in from the layer, but you can change that by clicking on the color icon if that's what you want to do. Okay, also underneath follow global grading objectives, cool stuff here, guys. Look at this: balance, cut and fill, minimize earthwork, and smooth surface. Those are all turned on. Okay, and that's it. Once I have selected my items, they have become a grading object, okay? I can change these as needed if I want to, but I'm gonna go ahead and close the grading limit properties dialog box and check it out. This is what I was talking about. In the grading objects browser, I can see there's now a 1 next to grading limit, and there it is, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and end my object isolation. And just like that, we have a grading limit. So now we're going to go ahead and do the building pad. So I'll go ahead and we'll select similar. And once again, props to Craig on this. I love what he did. That's why I'm using his drawing for this. Okay. And what we want to do is click on building pad here. Okay, select our building pad, and then we right click and go through the settings. Now, what we're gonna do in this particular case, first off, notice the name, which is cool. Oh, and by the way, even though it does pull from the layer, if I did wanna change this name, I could easily change it here to whatever I want. Maybe I just want this to be called building pad, for example. Okay, I can change that right here, but notice and keep in mind that the default name is coming from the layering. Okay, all right, we have an elevation option that we can turn on. Notice we can put in a fixed elevation or min max elevation. Maybe we want grading optimization to be able to calculate that elevation for us. So that's pretty cool that we can turn those on. But check this out. We've also got level grading with pad. Okay, so that's going to create smooth grading around the pad for us. Grading optimization is going to take care of that for us, okay? And if you ever have another thing that's cool here, guys, I know a lot of us, we don't like to ask for help, right? Like, hey, what does this mean? And I don't want to go into the help file. Well, let me tell you something. The help file actually has some great documentation, but there's also some good stuff right here at your fingertips. You don't have to browse to help. Like if you wanted to know, what does this mean, the level grading with pad? Click on the little I button here and check it out. It actually gives you a brief explanation what that functionality is going to do for you. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out real quick. So with that, check it out. There's my building pad. It now shows up in the Grading Objects browser. Okay, couple of things as well to point out here. Maybe I need to adjust the properties of what I did with this, right? I can right click and I can zoom to, which is cool. So that allows me to go in there, but also, let's see. Come on now. There we go. If I click on the building pad, I can bring up the properties and I can change that from the browser. Okay, just like the grading limits. If I click on it, maybe I didn't want that 40:1. Okay, I can go in and I can modify them after the fact. Okay, so that's a couple of things that I wanted to point out there. Okay, so now we've got our building pads. Next, we've got landscaping. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select similar for the landscaping. Okay, and then I am going to isolate my object. So the same thing. Now, one thing to mention here is that you can apply grading objects to multiple AutoCAD objects at once, and it's actually going to create separate items for each AutoCAD object. So in this particular case, when I get done, you're going to see that I'm going to have several landscaping zones for this, okay? But with that being the case, we don't have anything for landscaping, right? Notice over here, there's not a landscaping item over here, okay? So what happens with landscaping, these are going to be indicated as zones. So one thing that you can do, and Craig, you showed this on your class, which I thought was pretty cool. These items over here, you can actually copy and paste these on your palette and then use them with criteria that you want. So for example, if I right click on zone here and I copy it, and then I right click and paste it, okay? What I can do is go into the properties of the pasted element, and I can call this, for example, landscaping zone, okay? And maybe I put the same thing in the description, okay? And then maybe what I want to do is change the global constraints to customize, and then I can come in here and put in like my 40 and my 1, and then say okay. So now once I do that, check it out. Now I've got landscaping zone that I can use later, which I thought phenomenal job on showing that. So I figured I would bring that into this presentation as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now click on landscaping zone. I'm going to select all my green landscaping and hit enter. Okay, and now you can see it did take those properties in that I had set up in that custom landscaping zone item and all the other settings that I wanted, okay? And notice break line, okay? That's gonna be key down the road for you, okay? Now, what happened with the creation of grading objects? Well, look at zone. It now says 8, okay? These are all numbered and named landscaping. That's because of the layering, okay? So think about it. If you're not happy with your layering, you're probably going to have to go into each one of these and you're going to have to rename them the way you want. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to point out about the layering, how important that is. Okay, now with that being the case, we're going to do sidewalks next, because check it out, sidewalks are an actual grading element as well for grading optimization. So I'm going to select similar here, and then I'm going to isolate my objects, and there I have my sidewalks. Okay, so if I select sidewalks, come on now, you can do it. Oh, there we go. I'll go ahead and select them. Okay. Now you can see we've got our slopes. I'm going to go ahead and change the max to 2 and the min to 0 here. But notice some of the other settings that we have. There's something called inclination direction, which basically allows us to dictate if we need to kind of dictate the way we want it to slope, like our primary direction for sloping. What it allows us to do, if you click on the pencil here, you'll see it gives us like a little compass icon in the drawing. And what I like to do is if I know this is kind of the direction that I want, I could use like O snaps to snap in my drawing. Or another thing you could do, let's say that you know you want it relatively at 310 degrees based on what you're seeing on the compass here. I can go ahead and get it close to that amount and click, and notice how it populates. Okay, so if I wanted it at a perfect 310, I could go ahead and get that entered, and then get rid of any decimals. That way I know that's the direction that I want it to drain to. Okay, so now I've got my sidewalks in there, and I put 310, which is pretty darn cool. And of course, notice you've got a depth of material. So if you wanted to change that, make sure you have your break lines on as well. Okay, and now once again, you'll see that where did the sidewalks end up? Well, they show up under zones in my grading object browser. So that's something to keep in mind. And as you use grading optimization, it'll start to make sense, and you'll start to develop your workflow and understand where these elements actually show up in your grading optimization browser. Okay, so we've also got parking lot zones that I'm going to put in, and accessible path zones. So I want to talk about those here in a second. Let's do the parking lot real quick. Okay, so we'll go ahead and select similar, and then we'll do the isolate objects. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab the parking lot objects. All right, we'll go ahead and select those. Okay, and check it out with the parking lot. Notice that we have a default max slope of 5% minimum. These can be changed, like mentioned before, as needed per your specific requirement. For this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and leave them, but then I'll go ahead and put 2.5 on the depth of material. And like I said before, remember, you can change colors if that's what you need to do, but there's the property for them. Okay, and we'll go ahead and end object isolation, and now you will see that our parking lots, we basically have, they come in as a pavement item. Okay, so if you're looking for a parking lot item over here in Grading Objects browser, you're not going to see a parking lot item, you're going to see a pavement item. Okay, all right, so with that said, I'm going to do accessible real quick now. The thing to remember with accessible paths in grading objects is that these are inside of the parking lot areas, but we want them to have specific control because they're accessible paths, right? So what we want to do is identify those accessible paths as separate items, then turn them into accessible path grading objects that's going to have different criteria. Okay, so you're going to see that here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and select, let's go ahead and isolate the selected objects. I'm going to select accessible path. I'm going to select my 2 accessible path objects. And this is what I was talking about. Remember, we had max slope of 5% on the parking lot areas, but we know for accessible, the max can only be 2%. So this is where we can gain that type of control when it comes to our grading objects. So now those objects are going to have a max slope of 2% and a minimum slope of 1%. So that's the key to remembering how these objects work, okay? So we've also got curb grading object, which is pretty darn cool. I'll go ahead and select similar. We'll go ahead and isolate those. And then I'm going to go ahead and select my curb option. Okay, and once I right click, this is pretty cool. We don't have the ability to do different types of curbs. So don't think that, hey, well, I missed something because I didn't see how to put ribbon curb or rolled curb or things of that nature. You basically only have control over the height and width. But there is an option in here for reverse curb. And what that means is if you take a look, you're going to see a bold line. Okay, if you click on reverse curb, what it does is it changes the location of that where the back of curb is supposed to be. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave mine. That obviously is going to make a difference on your grading, and I wanted to point that out. Okay, so that is your curb object. Okay, another thing of utmost importance is the drain line. Okay, the drain line basically is for things like your toe of slopes, your low points, etc. But it's also kind of telling grading optimization, hey, I want my drainage to kind of go in that direction, but I'm kind of fine tuning it by using these drain lines. The same thing can be said of bounded points, which can be used for things like if you have a catch basin inlet or a curb inlet or things of that nature. Same thing with low points. These 2 items are basically used for entering actual elevations that you want to make sure that the grading objects are going to maintain. Okay, so real quick, let's do the drain lines. I'll go ahead and select similar. We'll go ahead and isolate the objects. We'll go ahead and go to drain line. We'll select our drain lines, okay? And really, there's only 2 settings here for your drain lines, okay? Whether you want them to be brake lines and if you want to change the color, okay? So let's see, got a quick question. Can you specify criteria on sidewalk for cross slopes and running slopes? Not sure. Tell you what, let's see, William, if we can talk about that towards the end of the presentation, because I need to get some more information on specifically what you're asking there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now that these are grading objects. I'm going to end the isolation. So we now have grading objects in there. And now real quick, I'm going to show you how to do a bounded point, because like I said, that's one of the elevations that we want to maintain. So I'm going to go ahead and select that from here. and then we'll isolate. Okay, and like I said, this could be for something like a catch basin, entry point, or a pipe inlet, anything of that nature. And basically how we use it is we come over to bounded point in our tool palette, and then we select the object that we want to be a bounded point. Okay, and this is where we can actually put in an elevation. Okay, so because I ran through this before, I've got the 3021.8 that Craig had actually put in here. So that's good to go. We've actually got a bounded point now. And if I look at the grading object browser, you can see that's the bounded point. Remember, you can right click and zoom to, and it takes you right to that object. Okay. So now we've got that in there, and I will go ahead and end object isolation. Based on the time now, the last one I'm going to go into real quick because I'm going to do the easy bake oven here. I've got the second drawing in the collection that's already got all these identified as grading objects. I'm going to take that drawing and I'm going to optimize it. I'm going to send it to optimization. But before I do that, I want to point out the grading, the pond element here. I'm going to go ahead and select the pond. Let's go ahead and isolate. Real quick, I see question from Greg. Do the polylines need to be 2D, or can you use 3D polylines, i.e. existing brake lines? They can be, typically we use 2D polylines, but they can be several different types of elements. Remember, I mentioned one of the things you can select is hatches, okay? Let's see. Also, another question, is there an option to tie to existing sidewalk, bounded point but a line? Well, actually, that would be something kind of like you could use a bend line or an aligned edge for that, where you're actually specifying elevations at one end or another. So yeah, there are some elements. I would think you may want to use aligned edge for that. Okay. Oh, and it looks like Craig answered a question too. Not at this time for cross slope or running slope. Oh, you were answering William's question. Okay, thanks for answering that, Craig. I appreciate that. And hopefully, Antolin, check out, like I said, aligned edge. I think that's going to work really well for what you're asking for. Okay, or bend line, which can be used for specifying other elevations. Okay, all right, real quick, I want to show you the pond before I optimize the grading here. I'm going to go ahead and select pond in the tool palette. Okay, and then I'm going to select the pond and then right click. And what we have the ability to do here is we can choose from dry pond or wet pond. Okay, dry pond basically gives you access to change your storage volume, your max storage depth. You can turn on or off, allow boundary change. So if that's on, if the actual boundary of this can be changed, then you can go ahead and turn this on. If that shape of that pond needs to remain though, then you would probably go ahead and turn this off. Okay. The other thing to point out here is if you choose wet pond, well, now you have the ability, notice how our little WYSIWYG diagram here gives us the ability to edit not only the berm that we had with dry pond, but you've also got a permanent pool, which you can see the permanent water depth, the aquatic bench width, et cetera, et cetera. For our example, I'm gonna do dry pond, okay? And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zero out the berm and the freeboard, and I'm just going to stick with the 3-to-1 because I'm just worried about my slopes at this point. I'm not worried about a berm or freeboard for this particular example. Okay, so now that I've got that set, I've now got a pond object inside of my grading objects browser. So let me go ahead and end isolation. Okay, so a few other things that I did not get to. We've got a bend line example. We've also got elevation offset. There's also, you've got retaining wall that you can do. But like I said, for time's sake, I want to switch to another drawing that's already got everything added as grading objects. Okay, and now what I want to do, so if I take a look at this real quick, if I turn on my grading object browser, you can see we've got all of these things created. There's 3 bend lines in here. There's some aligned edges. There's even a retaining wall. So now that I've got my grading objects created, the next step in the process is to go to the Optimize button. Okay, and like I said, this will take just a second for this to open up. Okay, can roads be incorporated into grading optimization? So Jamil is asking that question. It depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about, do you have polylines and you want to put a minimum maximum slope on them, then in that particular case, you would be treating roads as pavement areas. But roads as like a typical cross-section type scenario, not really in that particular case, okay? Now, you could take into a pavement area and maybe put like a bend line along it so that maybe you could get it to crown or something along those lines. But in the true sense of like a corridor or something like that, corridors cannot be brought into grading optimization. So you have to think a little bit more like AutoCAD elements when it comes to grading optimization. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Okay, now with that being said, this is the grading optimization window, if you will. We have a browser on the left, and it functions similarly to what we saw with GO. So notice I can select the objects here, and I can even see their properties. So if I didn't do something the way I wanted to while I was back in Civil 3D, here in Grading Optimization, I can change the properties as needed by clicking on them. I can also turn things on and off here. Okay, so like if I didn't want to see my pond, notice how the pond was gone. Same thing with the building pad. If I didn't want to see the building pad, I could turn it off, turn it on, that type of thing. The middle here is our work area. To navigate, I can zoom in and out as needed. If I left click and move my mouse, it acts like a 3D orbit. So kind of like your Civil 3D object viewer. Okay. We also have a view cube in the top right-hand corner. I know a lot of you probably don't like it. I have a love-hate relationship with the view cube, but anyways, it's there. And then down the bottom, we have our grading optimization toolbar. So you can go into settings for your preferences. Okay, you can go in and turn on your visualization toolbar. So there's a lot of different themes that you can be viewing this as. Okay, you can see cut fill, you can see violations. Okay, so violations show you max slope, min slope violations, or violations in both, or you can just turn that off. And different methods for viewing. You can see under topology here, I can do contours, or I can see the tin lines. So some people like seeing the triangles changing as it's optimizing. I like to see the contours because, I don't know, I just think that's cool. Okay, same thing with hydrology. You can turn on direction vectors, and if I zoom in just a little bit, you can actually see the slope arrows on here. So kind of give you an idea of what's going on with that. Okay, now ultimately, what we would want to do at this point, now that we have our grading objects created, we want to hit the optimize button down here. Okay, so first off, we have optimization options. Okay, notice our global constraints. Remember the ones that we started with, but we changed them. So those can be changed, as well as iterations, and then objective weights. Okay, I'm going to hit optimize real quick, and I'm going to look to see if we got any questions. How can these be edited? Can we insert PI to have the created features? We have had trouble in the past using corridors and not being able to, well, Jonathan, we're not using corridors here. These are simply AutoCAD objects that were selected. So think about that. If there's specific elements that that you want in your geometry, you might want to do that ahead of time. To get the geometry, because the way the geometry is drawn is a big factor as well. You have to take that into consideration, that the way the geometry is drawn is going to affect the way grading gets optimized in the grading optimization. Geez, I had trouble saying that. So as you can see in the background, you can see the contours are changing. They're kind of morphing as the iterations are going through. What I recommend you do after you hit optimize is click on this button here for convergent plots. Okay, because what this is going to do is it shows you the proximity measure under feasibility. Okay, it also shows the volumes and terrain smoothness. But the idea with convergence plots is it should be starting to trend down towards zero. It is normal for it to spike here and there, but you want this to trend towards zero. And ultimately, if you let this go, let's say that I go out for a long lunch break and I just let this go through, ultimately what I would see is it getting close to 100,000 iterations, okay? But typically, we're not going to let it go that many. We're going to come down and we're going to hit the stop button so that we can bring the grading result back into Civil 3D. Okay, but real quick, I am going to end up stopping this so you can see what we get in Civil 3D. But real quick, I just want to show you in my PowerPoint what it would look like after about 15, 20 minutes of letting this go. This dialog box, you can see the line down here, it has hit zero and it's starting to approach 25,000 iterations. If you've got it to this point, you're probably in excellent shape to go ahead and hit the stop button and then send your results to Civil 3D. If you've got extra time, of course, and you want to let it go through additional iterations, you can do that, okay? Let's see, somebody asked in the optimization settings, why didn't you change the max slope to 40% and the mins? Well, I could have done that, Yadira. That could have been what I wanted, but maybe those settings are just for this particular project. And my other projects, I don't want to save the global settings to 40 and 1. So that's why I did it just for this particular situation. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, now let's see, where is, looks like oh no, it's, there it is. Okay, so with that being said, if you get it down to zero and you're happy with the results that you're seeing, what you would then do is hit the stop button, okay, and then you'll notice that you can send the optimized results. So what this is going to do is take the result, it gives you this dialog box. Notice you can get a surface, you can get feature lines and points, okay? You have the ability to either create a new surface or update an existing surface. I'm just going to call this new FG, okay? And the style here, I'll go ahead and keep the 0.5 and 1.5, okay? And I'll hit finish, and we'll let that go to town. So what I'm gonna get here is a new surface that's optimized from grading optimization. I'm gonna get feature lines, and any points that come in are basically those bounded points or low points that I created, okay? Now the thing to remember is, and I can take a look at this if I wanna look at the surface and bring it into the object viewer, for example. You know, I can see that, hey, it did a pretty nice job of grading across it. Check out my pond over here that it did for me. Obviously, in the real world, I would go ahead and let it run through a little bit more iterations. But the point with grading optimization, guys, is it gets you to this point faster than you plopping in feature lines and adjusting each point. And you know how grading can take hours and hours at times, okay? So the other thing to keep in mind is a couple other things. If I didn't like the results, I can re-optimize and then bring a new surface or update the existing one. But the other thing to remember, it's also going to give you the ability to bring in feature lines and points. So what I would advise, if you're going to re-optimize, specify a new site for your feature lines and a new point group for your points, because it doesn't overwrite the ones that are there. Okay, so keep that in mind. But think about this: if what you're getting is you want to use the feature lines and blow away the surface that you just created, that's fine, because grading optimization is giving you the feature lines and getting you closer to the finish line with the outputted items. Okay, so with that being said, we got about a minute left here. I just want to cover our agenda again. We talked about grading optimization. I gave you an overview of the buttons and functions. I talked about the grading optimization elements, the grading optimization strategy, and there's a few different strategies that can be sprinkled in here, but I gave you an overview on that. We created grading objects in our drawing, showed you how to optimize the grading, and we talked about reviewing and editing, because you can re-optimize and re-import. And then finally, we sent the optimization back to Civil 3D with a created surface, feature lines, and points, okay? And once again, the class drawings that I used were from Craig's AU class. He did a phenomenal job. So with that being the case, if you have any other questions, it is the top of the hour. Please feel free to reach out to me directly if you'd like to. Yeah, I can be emailed at ron.couillard@uscad.com. Let's see, I'm going to